Hey everyone, welcome to part 4 of the September Stitch Along. I'm Christy with Coral Daisy Creates, and tonight I am trying pre-recording the Stitch Along in hopes of having a little better video quality for some of the more detailed stitches. Tonight we're going to learn the stem stitch. So I'm going to show you a more detailed stem stitch closer up, and then we'll come back to the stitch along. Today I'm going to show you the stem stitch, and I've used a friction pen that is erasable. I love it because it's erasable with either a hairdryer or an iron, or you can, manually erase with the little eraser at the end, but I typically use the iron. I've used it to draw a line on my fabric, and then I've got marks here to hopefully help make a little more sense. So I've got number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we'll see how this goes. Hopefully it helps make a little bit more sense. And I'm using a variegated thread because it will give you a better feel for the actual stem effect of this stitch, which I think is really pretty. So I'm gonna go from behind. I've got just my knot in the end of my fabric, and I'm going to bring my thread up at number 1, and then I'm going to put my needle down at number 2. And the key to this stitch is making sure that you keep your excess thread always above your stitching. So I'm gonna hold the thread, it's kind of wound up here, but I'm leaving about an inch to inch and a half. Then I'm gonna go behind and I come back up at number 3, which is 3 is just halfway between 1 and 2. So then I go down at number 4, and then you use with this stitch, use each of the holes you make in your fabric twice. So you're going to come back up at number 2, which is just the midway point between 3 and 4. Then you're gonna go down at number 5, come back up at number 4. My numbering maybe doesn't make that much sense, but that's probably okay. You'll survive, hopefully. And then I'm gonna go back down at number 6, come up at number 5, and just keep going like that. And it gives you a really neat kind of twisted rope effect that hopefully you can see pretty well. Just keeping the excess thread that you leave on the top at the same, always leaving it above. That way you get the pretty twisted look. And this is a fun stitch because the thread definitely has a lot of dimension to it and is very substantial, I suppose would be a word to use, on the top of the fabric. So it's always has a really neat effect. It's good to use for text, like if you have somebody's name you're stitching or a phrase, it's great for that. And it's just a real good little versatile stitch. It's not really that complicated, it just appears that way. Oops. So I pulled it all the way through. I just grabbed some more slack and you can just go back and fix it. So just keep going up and down, and that is the stem stitch. All right, now that you know the basics of the stem stitch, I'm going to go ahead right here and I'm going to stitch this. It's about really a horseshoe shape. I'm going to stitch that using the stem stitch. And in our example, we talked about keeping the thread above the stitching. I'm just going to, I suppose I can do it this way. I can move, if that is something that helps you. I do not innately know my left and right. So I'm one of those people, and that I think is partly why the stem stitch has been a little trickier for me to learn, but now that I've figured it out, I love it. So I just twisted my hoop so that technically I'm keeping my thread above, the extra thread above. So again, you make a bigger stitch for your first stitch and then pull it through. And really all of your stitches are going to be the same size. It just kind of feels like they're half the size. So I'm gonna come back up through the fabric, just always leaving probably, I'm not sure how much that is, probably 1.5 inches of slack. And then pulling the thread through. So just keep going. And I don't know, I'm hoping that it kind of shows here, but it is definitely quite a bit thicker on the top of the fabric, which I know I told you all I like my thread chunky. So I've got a double length of thread. I just fold the thread over and tie a knot at the end. But if you look, you can kind of see here just how this is definitely, it's probably, on my fabric, it's probably close to 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little less, but it's definitely standing out more than the back stitch or the running stitch. So it adds quite a bit more substance, I suppose you would say. So I'm just gonna keep going along my line. Stem stitch always looks beautiful, I think, when you have a curve. So it definitely lends itself to that. There are some stitches that seem trickier if you're trying to do it in a circular pattern. And this is one that really, I think, lends itself to a more circular shape. It looks, I think, even prettier that way. So just leaving the excess again. That's the key, just putting the excess along the top of the fabric or on the top of your stitching, and you go up through each hole, and then you're going to eventually go down through each hole. So that is the stem stitch. And that is tonight's stitch along. Hopefully over the weekend you guys will have maybe a little more time for stitching. I would love to see how far along you've come. I will admit, I'm probably not going to just restitch this whole thing since I've got one. I don't know that I'm going to fill everything in, but I think I will probably take my piece that I used as a sample, and I'm going to make sure and fill some of those areas in. So what I will do, and I'm deciding what areas I want to stitch. Our hoop for this is 6 inches. So one thing I will do is just lay the hoop on top of the fabric and decide where I want to put it and make sure that I've got everything in that area stitched. Then typically I will, because I'm, you know, slightly scattered, so I will probably draw a line around the edge of the hoop so that I make sure that I've got that full area stitched. Remember that you're going to want your line to be on the outside of the inner hoop, because you want to make sure that you're going to cover the edge of that in your design. So I think that I probably am going to want to put the edge. This is a hard decision. A very hard decision. I think I'm going to want to put this right here. I really like this guy. It kind of reminds me of a rooster. So I'm going to put that on the edge and then just trace around it. If you're really throwing caution to the wind, you could trace with a pencil or something like that. I'm just using the friction pins that I like, but that way it's not as easy to see actually because of the black, but I know that way that I'm gonna get my whole area filled in. And just as I look, I need to do a little more stitching right here and a little more right here. And then I should be good to put it in the hoop and put it on the wall. I can always check as well to see if everything, I'm gonna open this up a little more because my stitches are chunky. So I just want to make sure that everything that is showing is stitched, because I'm particular that way. Okay, maybe now I've got it open enough. Maybe not. We'll find out. This is what happens when you think you're going to make your design giant and you don't. So what I really actually could do, and this might be the thing to do, is just draw with a pen. I'm just going to mark the areas that I need to make sure and stitch. And that way I'll know that I like how it's going to look in the hoop. So I'm just going to mark those 3 areas. Now that I've got those areas marked, I'll be able to take this out of the hoop and see where I want to be sure and fill in. So that's how I do that. Hopefully y'all get a chance to get some stitching done this weekend, or at least do something fun. And I will see you back here on Facebook Monday night.